All right. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started here so we can keep ourselves on track this morning. First of all, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. We are going to be talking today about a CDBG COVID public service funding opportunity that we are working to develop, and we're excited to share some information with you all about that today. My name is Molly Kaler. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development here at the Community Development Finance Authority, or CDFA. I'm joined by my colleagues, Chris Monroe, the Senior Director of Community Development, and Melissa Latham, the Director of Policy and Communication. And we are excited to tell you more about this funding opportunity and to answer any questions that you might have at this point. This funding opportunity that we're talking about today, again, is a specific one related to the CDBG COVID funds or CDBG-CV funds. We do have a number, of other funding opportunities with our regular CDBG program, and we will be having a workshop coming up in early November for our upcoming CDBG Housing and Public Facilities round. That is a more typical regular funding opportunity that we offer twice per year. And so if you have a project that would fit, would be more aligned with those funding opportunities, we encourage you to join us on that upcoming webinar. Today, we are going to talk about this funding opportunity, and then we are going to, oops, I'm trying to advance the slide and it's not going. Give me a moment. We just did introductions. And again, I'll say for folks that have just joined, if you haven't already done so, it would be helpful if you could indicate your name and what organization you are representing in the chat today. We are just wrapping up with introductions, and then we're going to go through a brief overview of our organization, CDFA, and the CDBG program. And then we're going to get into the specifics of this new funding opportunity that we're talking about today. And then we'll wrap up with questions. And again, we're going to make sure that we pause multiple times during the conversation this morning to answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to encourage you to use the Q&A box that is at the bottom of your screen and write down any questions that you might have in there. And then our team will be sure to answer that question. And you'll see those questions once we are able to either address them back in writing or once we're able to speak to them as part of the webinar today. So please don't hesitate to use that Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And just real quick before we get into it, this is a little bit more information about that other upcoming webinar that I just mentioned. It's related to our CDBG housing and public facilities programs. We have a funding opportunity around with an application due date at the end of January. And so we are going to be having this workshop on November 5th to share more information about those funding opportunities specifically, but then we also do a brief overview about the other CDBG funding opportunities. This conversation today is specifically about the CDBG COVID funds public service round that we are launching. And that round is targeted towards individuals experiencing homelessness or at risk for homelessness. So if your project doesn't fall into that category, it might be more appropriate to join us for that later webinar. We can drop a link in the chat about the best that you could register for that workshop. And then we'll also be sending a follow-up email out after this webinar, and we'll have more information and resources about this funding opportunity, as well as the link to that other webinar that's coming up. I should also note that I'm sure you saw when you logged on that this webinar is being recorded today. That's because we certainly have some folks that weren't able to join us today but want to learn more about this opportunity. The recording will be shared with you all in that follow-up email that we send out, as well as with any other individual who might be interested to learn more about this funding opportunity. All right. So bear with me a minute. I have some handwritten notes in front of me that I'm referring to. So I just wanted to start off by giving those of you who aren't so familiar with the Community Development Finance Authority a quick overview of our organization. We were created back in 1983, so we've been around for more than 40 years, and we've been effectively deploying technical and financial resources to help granite staters in the communities that they live in thrive. Our mission is to maximize the value and impact of community development, economic development, and clean energy initiatives throughout New Hampshire. And we see a future New Hampshire whose communities are economically and socially resilient, that they reflect and respect their natural surroundings and are places where people want to live, work, and play. CDFA provides a variety of financial resources, including the competitive deployment of grants, loans, and state tax credit equity. We work with applicants to understand their project, align that project with the different types of CDFA funding and financing, to navigate CDFA's application and review process, and to connect individuals with other potential funding resources. And our impact of this work can be seen in revitalized downtowns, high-quality childcare facilities, renovated housing, clean energy projects, and a lot of other different types of community projects around the state. So now we're going to do a high-level overview of the CDBG program. So the Community Development Finance Authority, or CDFA, administers New Hampshire's statewide allocation of the Community Development Block Grant Program, or CDBG as it's commonly known. CDFA receives those funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, on an annual basis. So it's a federally funded program that HUD administers, and the statewide allocation of funds are distributed or granted to CDFA every year to administer throughout the state. We award typically about $9.3 million of that annual allocation to eligible municipalities and counties in order to support the development of viable, sustainable, and equitable communities. This is achieved by expanding economic opportunities for persons of low and moderate income in New Hampshire. We've administered the annual allocation of federal CDBG funds on behalf of the state since back in 2003. And these critical resources have been deployed across the state and have made a significant impact on economic development, housing, and community-based projects in dozens of municipalities. This chart right here is just a quick overview of some of our regular annual funding opportunities through our regular formula CDBG program. The funds are awarded to projects across the state, except for what HUD calls entitlement communities. There are 5 communities in New Hampshire that are HUD entitlement communities. Those communities are Manchester, Nashua, Rochester, Dover, and Portsmouth. Entitlement communities receive their own separate allocation of CDBG funds to support projects that are located there in their municipalities. So typically, those communities are not able to apply for projects through these opportunities that you see on your screen that are funded with our annual formula CDBG allocation. The funds, again, they flow from HUD, and then they are awarded to CDFA to administer. And then CDFA makes grants to municipalities or to counties. Again, that's a federal regulation that the funds must be awarded to local units of government. But then there's often eligible sub-applicants that want to be the ones that actually carry out the project. And those sub-applicants, if awarded, of course, become sub-grantees. And then, of course, the end person is the beneficiary that is actually benefiting from the investment. So just a little bit about this this pot of money that we have here that is going to be funding this opportunity that we're talking about today. Back when the pandemic started in 2020, the state of New Hampshire received CARES Act funds to be deployed through the CDBG program in response to the pandemic. We received a couple different buckets of money that totaled approximately $14.3 million. These funds are more commonly referred to as CDBG-CV, and they're to be used specifically for the prevention of, the preparation for, and the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. You'll see on the screen here, we just outlined some of the different funding opportunities in areas that we have supported with these funds over the last few years. We did do a public service round early in the pandemic with applications due in 2020, and we provided funding for a larger variety of public service activities, and that was a successful round. And then we supported some other types of activities that you see here. We're now at the point a few years out where we do still have a bit of remaining funds from that those original allocations. We have just over $1 million of funds that are unobligated as of right now. There is a expenditure deadline that HUD has for these funds, and that expenditure deadline is within 6 years of when the first amount was awarded. So that means that our New Hampshire statewide CDBG funds must be expended by August 2026. So you can see we're less than a year out from the requirement of when those funds not only have to be obligated, but they have to be expended by next August. And so we have been, doing an analysis of what the best way would be to utilize these funds to address the response to the pandemic, the long-term impacts of the pandemic that we're still grappling with today. We've looked done an analysis of how we spend our previous funds, who received those previous funds, and then also, again, what those needs are that remain out there. And we've come up with an understanding that there is still, as you all know, being here today, a huge impact on unhoused or people at risk of being unhoused. That community was deeply impacted by the pandemic, and numbers rose substantially. Thankfully, there were a number of resources that were COVID related that initially came in to support that population, but we are hearing that the need remains for additional funding to continue to support unhoused individuals. And so this funding opportunity is specific to those type of activities. Again, these are just some of the objectives of this new round, and we're again looking to address those long-term impacts, to provide targeted support in communities that either are have a significant impact from this problem, or that maybe haven't received as many CDBG-CV funds previously. And then we're just looking to experience our expertise and our experience in administering these funds to successfully get them out the door in a relatively short time period. So this chart here is just a quick snapshot, a quick overview of some of the key details of this new funding opportunity. It is available again per the federal CDBG requirements. The funds need to be granted to a unit of local government, and then those units of local government can either carry out the services themselves, or they can work directly with eligible service providers who will be providing the eligible services to the population that we're focused on. They are we're setting the award amounts a minimum of $100,000 and a maximum of $500,000, and the application deadline we have it right now scheduled for December 1st of this year. We will work very quickly to review applications and try to get the award decisions in early January. And then we will have a quick turnaround time of the project timeline. Again, that's in order to meet the expenditure deadlines by HUD, that we need to make sure that we meet that and get all of the reimbursements processed and paperwork to HUD before that August deadline. So the projects and the reimbursements that you'll be submitted, if awarded funds, will need to be in by June 30th of 2026. What we mean by public services, if you've not familiar with the term, how HUD uses it, are it needs to be a new service or a quantifiable increase in the level of service beyond what's been provided. We are looking at this because it's COVID funds of a quantifiable increase that has occurred since the COVID-19 pandemic. And so if you are still addressing new service in providing new services or an increase in services that are being provided due to the pandemic, we feel that that would meet the requirements of public services. For any CDBG funding that goes out the door, one of the key first eligibility requirements is that the project needs to meet the CDBG national objective, it's called. And in New Hampshire, all of our projects need to meet the national objective called low to moderate income. And that low to moderate income HUD considers is 80% of area median income or less. And there are a couple different ways that can be documented. It's most typically done using area benefit metrics or the metrics of a limited clientele. Again, because we have a really narrow focus of this funding opportunity on individuals experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, it would likely that you would be using the limited clientele method to be able to document that you meet the low to moderate income requirement. There are a number of different ways that you can meet that limited clientele requirement. And one of them is if you are serving an exclusive presumed group, you can provide documentation that attests to that, basically. And so we are thinking a majority of service providers or municipalities might be able to indicate that the homelessness is a presumed group. I should back up and say homeless is a presumed group. And so if your services are targeted towards that population, you would likely be able to meet that requirement that way. And there are some other ways as well. If you sometimes might need to collect income verifications or other ways to do that. And we will certainly work with you to understand that as you work on your application. But we just wanted to flag that that's one of the key requirements of the CDBG program, that we're going to have to make sure your projects meet that national objective and have the appropriate documentation to be able to document that for HUD. And the other key eligibility requirement is that it meets your project meets an eligible public service activity. And Chris is going to jump on now and just go through the next few slides where we list out the priority public service activities that we are focused on for this funding opportunity, and just tell you a little bit about what we mean by what that activity entails and some examples of what kind of documentation might be provided. We know it's a little bit early when you're just thinking about submitting an application to go through some of these details, but we thought it might be helpful as you're thinking about potentially submitting an application to understand if the activities that you have in mind align with what is eligible under this funding opportunity. So do you want to go through, jump in, Chris, and go through on this slide to start with, or do you want to just jump into each one? We have each one listed out on a following slide.
Yeah, we can start with the slides fine. As Molly mentioned, these are the eligible public service activities that we've listed kind of based off our previous public service round. And there are other eligible activities listed under HUD, so we can certainly have follow-up information or conversations on that. But we found that these few that we've listed are typically aligned with most service providers and are the best way to kind of get funds out the door quickly into categories that you're already doing as part of your work. So if you go to the next slide, please. So for homeless programs, which include direct services for your organization or municipality, there's things like staff costs, utilities, maintenance, and insurance. So those are your typical operating costs that are covered under the public service program. substance abuse treatment and recovery programs, prevention education activities specific to homeless at risk of homeless populations. So, that's pretty self-explanatory, but any direct services that you're already providing or costs associated with outreach, community outreach engagement, that kind of thing as part of your organization, that's covered as well. Paying the cost of operating and maintaining that portion of the facility in which the service is located is also considered to fall under the basic eligibility category of public services, even if such costs are the only CDBG funded contributions for those services. So again, just looking at your operating and maintenance costs, and we can also provide examples on that, but that's under the homeless programs, what we would cover as eligible costs related to that. Next slide, please. For subsistence payments, utility payments to prevent cutoff. This is for subsistence payments to your clients. So if they are, in transition into housing, or they are in housing but are at risk of losing their housing, we can cover utility payments to prevent cutoff. There's a 3 months maximum benefit period. So, and that applies across all the direct sort of payments or covering that for your clients, whatever services that is, whether it's rent or those kinds of things. There's a 3 months maximum on that for the benefit period. And then for subsistence payments, we can't cover arrears. So if they owe, if there's a fee that they have to pay to cover the shutoff, we can, if they're, so any back pay or arrears we can't cover, but if there's a service connection fee that they have to pay again or something like that, we could likely cover that cost. And I just see a question in the chat. Let's see if we can answer it. Timeline start date for expenses to be eligible for reimbursement, and if an application is approved. Molly, I don't know. I know we've talked about that a little bit. Is that by the award date?
Okay. So the latest you could go back is to your application date, actually, of as of right now, December 1st. That would be at your own risk. We'll talk a little bit more about the award and contracting process, but the funding isn't absolutely secure until it goes through the government contract process. I'm sorry, the governor and council process. And so that from that point forward, you would be, definitely able to, get expenses reimbursed. If it's prior to that, that would be at your own risk until it successfully goes through governor and council. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Molly. We can go to the next slide, please. So the other eligible category is eviction prevention. So that covers rent costs associated with renting. So any fees or if they have to pay for a background check or anything like that, that could be covered. Again, 3 months for the maximum benefit period. Will not cover arrears, and will cover up to the designated fair market rent. So HUD cannot provide above fair market rent for this program. So this would sort of, hopefully they would be in units that would be at fair market, depending on the type of housing they're getting into, but we can provide more information on that as well. Go to the next slide, please. So security deposits kind of falls under that previous category of costs associated with renting. Covers security deposits for permanent housing. It's up to first month's rent, so they can't go above that as far as the reimbursement or advance, and does not count against the 3-month benefit period, but ideally benefits are spread across clients. So for instance, you could have someone moving from a shelter into permanent housing. We could cover the security deposit and background check, and then they would get 3 months of rent covered under this program as well. But it's up to you as far as how you're organizing that, or your costs associated with your per client sort of analysis, and seeing how you want to distribute those funds, or in your application kind of identifying your expenses and how much you're looking to cover. Go to the next slide, please. So for health, mental health services, supportive services provided to homeless at-risk individuals, operating costs, program delivery costs, and maintenance costs. So this falls under if you're like a mental health service provider and are supporting clients who are homeless or at risk of being homeless, you can cover costs associated with running that facility as well. Ineligible services, there's more ineligible services than this, but just flagging a few of them. Political activities. So, if you are going to lobby for a bill that would be, pertinent to your organization, and we wouldn't be able to cover costs associated with that. Ongoing grants or non-emergency payments defined an entitlement program. It's more than 3 consecutive months to individuals for their food, clothing, rent, utilities, or other income payments, and payment of expenses in connection with litigation against the department or your organization. So, like legal fees, that kind of thing. And then regarding duplication of benefit, do you want it? I can. Okay.
You can take this one and then I'll take over after this one.
All right.
Or chime in
I'll give
too.
you a little bit more of a break so you can,
Yeah.
drink your coffee, whatever you gotta do. So duplication of benefit occurs when a beneficiary receives assistance. The assistance is from one or multiple sources, and the assistance amount exceeds the need for a particular recovery purpose. So we can co-fund benefits, but as long as that's being tracked. So as part of your application, you do a duplication of benefits analysis if you're receiving other federal funds or any kind of support at that level to ensure that there wouldn't be any, a client wouldn't be double billing for their security deposit or something like that. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just a financial management piece that we require to ensure that the funds are not being misused.
Great, thanks, Chris.
you.
I'm going to round out this section with just one more slide here. And this is just an overview of the timeline as we've developed. I want to note that we are working quickly to develop this funding opportunity and doing it a little more rapidly than we would like to do, just so that we get the funds out and that they can get expended by the deadline. And so we wanted to make sure that we had this informational session and get as much information as we have available out at this point. But we are working to still finalize some guidance information, and we're working to finalize the application and the scoring criteria. And so that will be coming very soon. And we will be notifying you when those materials are ready. So you'll see here, this is just a quick overview of some of the key dates that are coming up. We are working to get that application and funding opportunity on our grant management system, which I'll talk more about in a moment, by the end of next week, if not earlier. Again, the applications are going to be due on December 1st, and we're going to work through the month of December to review them. And then we plan to make award decisions in early January. What needs to happen after CDFA staff review the award the applications is that we have to make a recommendation to our Community Development Advisory Committee, or CDAC. They're a body made up of municipalities and other service providers and people that work in the space of the types of programs that the CDBG program supports. They meet monthly, and they approve all of the funding recommendations for our statewide CDBG funds. And so staff will make a recommendation for this funding round for funding on, and again, that's going to be based on the scoring matrix that we'll be releasing shortly. And we'll be making recommendations to CDAC. And then once that happens, our board approves it, and then contracts have to be drafted between CDFA and the grantee municipalities. And then those contracts have to go through the governor and council process. It's a requirement of all CDBG grants that the contracts go through governor and council. So it adds about 6 to 8 weeks after the award decision is made internally by CDFA and our advisory boards, that the contracts aren't fully executed and official until after the governor and council council approval. So when we said earlier that we will, accept reimbursement requests as far back as the date of the application on December 1st, you would be doing that at your own risk because the funding isn't secured until your contract goes through governor and council. So more than likely what you'll want to do is plan on this funding being available for our service activities in late winter through the springtime after your contracts go through the governor and council process. I'm gonna pause here for a second and just make sure, see if any questions have come in the Q&A box, or if anybody has any that have popped up, give you guys a minute to write it down. I am gonna get into a little bit more specific about the application and next steps coming up on the final part of the webinar. But as of what we've shared so far, I just want to make sure we leave some time for questions. Melissa, is there any?
Yes, Molly, you might get into this a little bit more with the municipal threshold requirements, but we do have a question about entitlement communities and whether a consolidated plan or an annual action plan qualifies as a housing and community development plan.
Yes, that's a great question, and I am going to talk more about that in a minute, but it will likely be able to qualify for that threshold requirement. We will need to see that and make sure that, for example, it's recent enough and that it's broad enough to include this type of activity, but more than likely you won't have to go back out and do a separate plan since you guys already do a plan for HUD. We're likely to be able to use that. The residential relocation plan, though, is project specific, and that would have to be a separate one that would be approved prior to submitting the application. But I'll talk more about that in a moment. All right.
I'm seeing no further questions.
Are any more questions? I'll go through the last few slides here and then leave some more time for questions. I will note that, again, as I've said now a couple times, we are working to still create guidance at this point, and we'll be providing additional materials and even possibly additional workshops if it seems like there's a need for that over the next few months before the application is due. This is just an overview of the funding opportunity and getting you some initial information to get started on some of the pre-application activities that need to happen. So if you think of any questions after the fact today that you want more information about, at the end of the slide, we'll have the different ways that you can contact us. And we definitely encourage you to reach out because if you have the question, there's a good chance that somebody else might. So we would love for you to flag that for us so we can make sure we're getting some good guidance out. And so this is just to reiterate that the if you were to go on our grant management system today on our website, you would not yet find the funding opportunity and application there, but it will be coming very soon. We are working to finalize that behind the scenes right now. Our goal is to get that available to you all by next Friday. And again, we will send a notification out once that is live and ready to be worked on. Applications will be due on Monday, December 1st. And how the process works for those who haven't yet applied for CDBG through CDFA is that the municipality and if they've hired a external grant writer, those are the entities that work in the grant management system. If there is a nonprofit service provider that is a co-applicant on the application, that is great, and we certainly encourage that. But we, in order to streamline activities, and because the municipality is the actual applicant, that would be the individual that would be working in the grant management system, and that individual would be responsible for working in coordination with the nonprofit to let them know what information is needed from them and entering that information into the grant management system. So if you are listening and you're from a nonprofit agency that might be working with a municipality to apply, just know that your role wouldn't be to be working directly in the grant management system. And this is just a screenshot of the grant management system, how you access it through our website. And there are a number of informational videos and tips and training for those of you who aren't as familiar with GMS and might want to learn more. We require for all CDBG awards that a grant administrator is hired to help administer the funds. That is a requirement for all of our regular CD funds, and we are making that a requirement for this public service round as well. We know that some of the municipalities, some of the entitlement communities have staff that are very well versed in entitlement CDBG, but because this is funds that are flowing through the state CDBG program, and because we have a really quick turnaround time in how we need to get the funds awarded and get reimbursements submitted, we are requiring that all grantees hire a external grant administrator to help with that, and that funding can be worked into your grant budget and come from your grant funding. You are not required to hire an external grant writer. It's strongly encouraged because external CDBG trained grant writers know about the pre-application requirements and could help work through some of those items like the public hearings and things, which we'll talk about in a moment. But again, I know some of the entitlement communities do have staff that work through very similar things on a regular basis, and we are going to be providing some guidance and materials to help with that. And so you are not required, you can do that internally if you choose to do that. But we do encourage you to reach out to us and ask questions because we just want to make sure that all the requirements are met and wouldn't make an applicant ineligible for any reason. So we're here as a resource for any pre-application requirements. So I just want to note some of those pre-application requirements now and get in a little more detail about them. So there are some general threshold requirements and some municipal application threshold requirements that have to occur before you even hit submit in CDFA's grant management system. And that's why we wanted to move quickly to get an informational session out there and get some initial materials out there so you guys can start that process if you're considering applying, because we know it can take several months sometimes. We are going to be the first public service round we put out a checklist, municipal application threshold checklist, and we are just updating that right now and getting ready to make that available to you all so you can make sure you are following all the steps. And then we will also have some templates available as well for like the notice, if you would like a template of the public notice, and some of the other requirements that are noted on the screen here. So more information will be available, by the end of next week for these initial thresholds, so for some guidance on these initial thresholds. But they are really important. These public hearings have to be properly noticed. And then at the hearings, a couple different things have to happen. There has to be authority given by the governing board of that municipality to apply for the application. There needs to be a housing and community development plan adopted if there isn't one already on file that will meet this requirement. There has to be that residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan adopted that I mentioned. That is project specific. So we have a template for that, and that would just have to be adopted as part of one of these public hearings. And again, there needs to be some clear evidence of the authorization of the governing body to an authorized official to apply for the funds. And then we need to see the meeting minutes that clearly outlines all these steps have occurred to meet the pre-application requirements. So there's going to be more information again to come that we will be putting out within the next week or so, because we understand that some of you, if you're considering applying, will be getting this process started very soon. But please reach out to us if you have any questions, because we just want to make sure you aren't missing anything in these first steps. And if you're not familiar with this, please consider working with an experienced CDBG grant writer that could help with these steps. These are just another list of the key kind of requirements that have to happen. A complete application obviously has to come in, and that has to happen pre-application. And then some of these things are just the other really initial general application thresholds that have to be met upon the application being submitted. We'll have some more guidance coming out about these materials. We are working on finalizing a frequently asked questions document, and then some specific information regarding which of these things apply and in what way they apply to your application. And that will, some of these things are asking for information to be uploaded along with your application to meet these requirements. So there'll be guidance, and then there'll be spots in your application for you to address some of the items on this page. And then, as I said, I just want to keep reiterating that, we are wanting to have this informational session today to get as much information as we have at the moment out. But we are still working really quickly behind the scenes to finalize some additional guidance and helpful information, such as that FAQ document and a municipal threshold checklist and some sample documents. We are going to be putting that information on our CDBG resource webpage. We have a special allocation section of that page where this information will live. And so as that follow-up email that we're going to send out, that we will have the recording of this webinar, we'll also have a link to that section of our website. And then again, we'll notify those of you that are on the webinar today when additional and some of this initial critical information gets added to the website. That is it for now. I just have this kind of question pause, and then a next step, which just talks about it's really important, and I want to stress this today, to schedule a pre-application meeting or even just an initial discussion. If you have an idea for an application and are thinking about starting that process, we just want to make sure you have any information that might be helpful for you to A, make the decision to apply or not, or B, to make sure you get some of this pre-application requirements met. We want to make sure that we're available to answer any questions that you might have. And so this slide right here just shows where on the website that you can go to schedule a meeting. And I think Melissa just dropped a link in the chat as well. Or this last slide here has my email address, and you're welcome to email me as well. And we can figure out if we just want to have a brief informational discussion to start with, or if you guys are, definitely decided upon applying for for funding and want to have a pre-application meeting, we could have one of those as well. And that's just a little more structured and might answer some more specific questions regarding the application process and next steps after you apply. So, any other questions, Melissa, that you spotted in the chat?
We do. We have a question about whether multiple municipalities are allowed to submit a combined application for a collaborative project.
That's not typical, and we could certainly talk about that and see if that might work. We have in the far past had some joint municipal applicants. It can get a little tricky though, getting meeting requirements that need to make when that happens. So it might be a challenge to do that, but we would love to talk with you more about that and see if that could happen. I will say as well, we are likely going to limit, just because again, we have a short turnaround time to try to get these funds awarded and then to get expended, that we are going to likely limit the number of sub applicants that you can have on an application. So of course, if a municipality is applying, the municipality can certainly carry out and request funding for those activities. But likely we're asking that applicants will limit to two other external service providers that you're working with for the purposes of this funding opportunity, just so we can make sure the resources can get expended in a timely manner.
So this isn't a question of the chat, but maybe just a way to ask this a little bit differently. If a municipality came in and had a sub applicant that was serving multiple municipalities within that area.
Oh, that's a good, okay,
Would
that's a
that
good point. Yeah,
qualify?
that's fine. Yes, that's fine. And that's, I would say much more common. And so, there would likely be service providers that reach, that work in multiple geographic areas. And I would say, if possible, look to come in with the municipality that, you do the bulk of your work in, but that's certainly okay, if your work extends beyond the borders of the application that you, beyond the borders of the municipality that you applied under. So sorry, thank you for rephrasing that, Melissa, because that makes a little more sense.
Well, it might have been a little bit different than the original question, but just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
That, yeah, multiple municipalities can be served by that sub applicant.
Yeah.
We do have a question about whether there's any insight on the scoring criteria that could be provided, and just noting that that's in development.
Yeah, it's in development, and we're going to be basing it on the scoring criteria that we used the first time around, with the public service, round back in 2020. However, we are going to, be prioritizing, and we're not quite sure what that looks like yet, and we'll be getting more information to you again as soon as we can. But we're going to be looking to prioritize communities that either, have high PIC counts and high, levels of unhoused individuals that are staying in their community, or that, didn't have access or, weren't awarded, CDBG-CV funds, from CDFA, the first, few rounds that we did of this funding opportunity. So there's likely to be, some prioritization, for those, communities in that scoring, but it is of course open to any community. This funding opportunity is open to any community, across the state, that has a need for funding for these kind of services.
Great, and just clarifying, because there is a question that these will be available to entitlement communities.
Yeah, I don't think I explicitly said that. I explicitly said that our regular funds are not available to entitlement communities, but, that's a great question, and I should explicitly say that yes, these, CDBG-CV public service funds are available to entitlement communities because it is CV funds. We have that exception that we can make, awards in entitlement communities, that unfortunately we can't typically do, but it's good news in this case that we can. And so, you are welcome to apply if you're an entitlement community, for, this funding opportunity.
I'm not seeing any additional questions at this time, Molly.
Okay. Well, again, I just want to reiterate, that if you have any questions that come up, as you digest this information after the workshop, please, don't hesitate to reach out. My, email address is there on the screen, or you could use that link to request a meeting. And we will, certainly follow up with you as soon as possible to answer any specific questions that you might have. Or let us know if there's additional guidance materials that might be helpful. I know there were some, specific ones noted in the chat here that we'll make sure that we, provide some follow-up information on, and we'll get that, information out to you and posted on our website, as soon as possible. And you'll see that again with the follow-up email that we'll be sending out to both those of you that have joined us live and those of you that are, registered for this webinar but weren't able to join us, live. We have your email address, and then please, feel free also to, share this, information with anybody else who wasn't able to join us or register today, because we want to make sure word gets out, throughout the state that this funding is available.